a lot of questions come up from the vaccine finally being here. Can an employer offer the vaccine? Can an employer mandate the vaccine? And then based on those two questions, what can it look like? So can it look just like the flu, how we offer the flu? So an employer can absolutely offer the vaccine. Now, one thing that's going to be challenging is the quantity. How can you get enough quantity to offer to everybody? Because you can't just offer it to some and not others. So the question becomes, will you be able to get your hands on enough quantity to be able to offer it to all of your employees? That's one. Then two, mandate it. You're technically able to mandate the vaccine. Now, whether that's a good idea or not, I think depends on your business and depends on if you think it is justifiable to say our business has to require this vaccine. And that's there's some different points you can go through to determine whether you kind of fit within is it justified to mandate the vaccine. So that's a whole kind of legal analysis that you can go through. But let's go back to, can we offer it and what does it look like? Because I think most people are probably going to fall within that. I'm not anticipating too many employers mandating it. I think the hope is that people go get it on their own. I think that employers are going to want to encourage it. And the EEOC is right now said that they are asking their employers to encourage. They've not said it's illegal or not appropriate to mandate it, but they've said right now they're recommending employers encourage the vaccine. So it can look like how you give out the flu vaccine. However, one thing to consider is I've heard, and in the medical community, they're talking about that people get sick. The flu shot, you get it and you can go back to your desk and you're there the next day. But I have heard you get sick, or more sick or achy, or I'm not sure. I have heard you could be out of commission for a couple of days. So if that's the case, you wouldn't want to offer it just like the flu because you don't want all your people going out sick on the same day. So I guess some of that maybe is to watch for and yet to come, because we're not going to be, employers are, other than healthcare employers, are not going to be in the first wave of getting enough of vaccine to vaccinate everybody. So maybe that's something we're paying attention to. But as of right now, I don't anticipate being able to distribute it in the same way you distribute the flu, in that you're going to need to have it more staggered. But if you offer it, you need to be able to offer it to everybody. It's got to be non-discriminatory. There can be no retaliation for if someone does not go get the vaccine. So I think it can be done in a similar manner as the flu vaccine, but you have to account for if people are going to get sick and then how you're offering it in waves. Then the other thing, exemption. So if you mandate it, if you say, well, I just want to mandate this, you do have to have exemptions for medical or religious exemptions. Those are, the interesting thing is a lot of states have the ability to mandate a vaccine, and that's at the state level. And some states have religious and medical exemptions. I think there's maybe one or two with philosophical exemptions. But then if you go even further in those states offer exemptions, some states even say during an epidemic, those exemptions are waived. But in the case of an employer, I don't think it rises to that same level. So you'd have to allow for medical and religious exemptions if you're going to mandate it. The biggest take home, I think, for employers that are even talking about the vaccine and if they're going to do something on the employer level, is to start talking about it now with your employees. Whether you have to do an update to your employee manuals, I'm not necessarily going that far. It might be good. Maybe you need a refresh on your employee manual anyway, but to start talking about it now, to start making sure people are informed, and so that you are in a position to encourage people to get it. I think that's going to make a big difference in how many of your population go get the vaccine. Are there any questions?
So we'll open this up to anybody. Feel free just to speak up.
Well, I have a question. Can your employer mandate that you do get the shot?
So technically, yes, but I do think that any employer that's going to mandate it go through an analysis of, how necessary is that for your business, the justifications that go into it. And there is, we've done a memo at Taylor English that kind of goes through the thought process as to mandate, and things to consider for an employer to consider to justify the mandate.
So could you get fired if you didn't get this shot if they mandate it?
I think technically, yeah. If your employer has mandated and the employer gave them notice, and that's one thing. If you say right now, hey, employees, we're going to mandate this, they've got an opportunity to go find another job. If they sit there and do nothing and then you've mandated it and you're justified in doing so, and they don't have a medical or religious exemption to claim, it's just like working from home. I mean, I think some employers have said they're going to make their employees come back, or Claire, you've been at the, working in the office. You're supposed to offer employees reasonable accommodations, and it would be just like that. I mean, if there's a reasonable accommodation to be made for an employee who refuses, you've got to consider that. But beyond that, the employer is within their rights to mandate it if they can justify it, and then let go people that don't want to comply with the mandate.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that I thought was interesting, and we'll see if this actually comes true, is that the Virginia, I don't know if he's the head of the Department of Health for the state of Virginia, he came out a month or so ago and said that he would mandate it for the entire state of Virginia once the vaccine came out. Now we'll see what actually happens when the vaccine comes out, but that's one person that I have heard will mandate it for their state. And most of the state's power to mandate a vaccine is with the Department of Health or that sort of regulatory body.
So I noticed that Nancy's on our call this time, and Nancy's been involved with some labor law. Nancy, could you share your thoughts and see where the conversation goes about how an employee should respond? If Christina's talking as an employer that says, I'm now mandating this, what should an employee do if they're opposed to it in any way?
They should get the shot. So, I do think that there would be likely unemployment insurance, if someone was to get fired for not taking it. In Georgia, the situation for unemployment insurance is you get it unless there's a good reason not to get it. And instead of, you have to prove your entitlement to it, basically. So, if you quit for a good reason, I'm not sure what that would be exactly if you didn't have a medical or a religious objection. But if you quit for a good reason, you might get unemployment for it. But, if you don't want to have the shot, go work for somebody else.
You mentioned, Christina, like a philosophical exemption. You said that was on a state-by-state basis, is that right?
Well, at the employer level, a philosophical exemption is not required. The EEOC has said, medical and religious would be required. And they put out a statement back when H1N1 had come out, and they kind of refreshed that statement. And they talk about religious and medical exemptions. There are only a few states that offer philosophical exemptions. And I think you can probably count them on one hand. So I don't think at the employer level it rises to that. And you've got so many limited states that even have a philosophical exemption.
And then on religious exemption, how do you prove that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not familiar with all religions. I'm sure there are some religions that have some way of saying, well, here, this is in our code, or I'm not sure. I'm Catholic. There's no religious exemption I could claim, but I wouldn't necessarily. I think you'd have to go to your code, or maybe you get a letter from the pastor, priest, rabbi, what, you know, whoever it is, maybe that would be support for religious exemption.
Yeah, thanks.
I got a question or a comment too. So from what I've been reading, I guess, about the vaccine, it's not one of those, you know, set it and forget it, that, you know, immunity declines, so that this may be a reoccurring thing. And if so, what do you think in terms of employers, A, paying for the vaccine, and then also B, if there's, you know, sick time, do you think employers will be responsible for paying or for the medical related and off time for taking the vaccine and having a, you know, reaction or having sick time or otherwise?
I do think if the employer is going to mandate it, I do think that they should then be responsible for paying for the sick time. If they're not going to mandate it and they're going to offer it, I think it would be a good policy for the employer to do that, because how are you going to encourage your employees to get it and then say, but by the way, we're not going to pay you when you get sick from the vaccine. So I think that would be, if you're going to offer it, you're going to get enough quantity, you're going to pay for it, you got to pay for it for everybody, you got to offer it to everybody. I do think if you're going to promote this as something you want your employees to have, it would be best practice to go ahead and pay time if they get sick. Are you required to, if you're just saying, hey, employees, go get this, but it's not required? I don't think technically you're required to, but I don't think that's going to help your business encourage people to get it. I have another interesting thing to put to the group, unless someone has a question.
Go ahead.
So I had one person say to me, well, do you think that we should require it because it would help get business back in the door? So say you're a restaurant and you post all our employees are vaccinated. I thought it was a very interesting question. And I didn't know. My husband and I were talking about, my husband's in the medical field. And he's like, he said at the point that it's going to be offered that big, he doesn't think that's going to come into play. And then he also made the point of, well, if you really care about the vaccine, then you'll just go get it. And then you don't care if the people serving you food didn't go get it. So I don't know, but I thought it was an interesting question.
Doesn't it seem, that seems to make sense if the vaccines are going to take 3 to 6 months to get distributed widely, right? There's only so many doses and it's a big world. So is there a liability by using that as a marketing message that as many of our employees that are vaccinated as possible, just as a...
But you could still get it from other patrons of that restaurant, so that would be hard.
Yes, that's another point. Yeah. But yeah, someone raised it and I was like, oh, that's
before you eat there.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. But then to my husband's point, he's like, well, if you can go get the vaccine yourself, what do you care about everybody else having it?
I'll be curious. I know that's not on this particular talk, but can countries require you to have it before you come into their countries?
Well, I do know with H1N1, the state of Illinois, because there was a case on it, required anyone going to China for, I think, anything. They required their citizen or their residents, Illinois, to get the H1N1, but they required it, not China. It wasn't China, but they required it for anyone, I think, coming back. And there was a lawsuit over it, and the court ruled that the state did have the policing power, and it was a reasonable use of their policing power in that scenario.
Go ahead. So the big question then becomes, as an employer, should you mandate it? And at the same time, Christina, would it be practical that you encourage it, and then as people become more accepting, that you raise, as an employer, you raise the requirements that now it's going to be mandated?
Yeah, and so I think the biggest point to all that is you should start the conversation now. You should, maybe have a group of employees that are tasked with with asking those questions and figuring out those answers, because what you don't want and what does not create trust is to just do something without, all of a sudden, tomorrow the vaccine's out, and now, by the way, I, as the sole head of this company, have decided I'm mandating it. That's not, so having the conversation now, maybe forming a committee and to talk about these things, to stay up on the research so that you can promote the vaccine, whether it's a mandate or you're going to offer it or you're not going to offer it, but you want people to get it, so that you're developing trust within your business, within your employees, to do what is best for the business.
Do you, and Nancy's still with us, is there any risk of personal information or privacy that comes in about, I don't want a vaccine, but I'm not going to tell you why, or I'm scared of the vaccine because it hasn't been fully tested? Who knows? That's not really true, but if I've got my suspicions, how do I have that conversation?
I think there is liability if you're disclosing who got vaccinated and who didn't, as far as HIPAA, and it's Nancy, please chime in.
Sure.
But a conversation about whether you're comfortable or not, Nancy, do you have any insight? I don't necessarily know if you can't force someone to talk about it, for sure.
Right. So, for purposes of the medical exemption, they're going to, obviously have to tell you why it is that they're objecting. But, I do think there's potential HIPAA liability, but the fact pattern would have to be sort of attenuated before, unless they're going to exempt you from HIPAA, unless there's an exemption from HIPAA for purposes of this, which I don't think there is. Do you know, Christina, is there one for pandemics?
I have not heard of any exemption for HIPAA for this.
Yeah.
So we can't label who's been vaccinated and who's not.
Right.
Which means we also can't give out a badge that says I voted. I can't give out a badge that says I've been vaccinated.
Right.
Will we post that on Facebook?
Well, they can self-identify, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
And you can, to your point, Hal, I know you were kind of kidding, but, if you gave them stickers, they could choose not to wear it. So, self-identifying is not a HIPAA violation.
Part of it, I wondered, like, let's say I chose that I was just like, no, I'm not going to go get vaccinated. I don't like getting shots. And Hal goes and gets his vaccination, and he shows me his certificate of authenticity of his vaccination. Couldn't I just, with all the capabilities we have now with photoshopping and whatnot, couldn't I just Photoshop his certificate and put my own name on mine and hand it in? I just wondered if they did require it, how could you give certification that would not be easily duplicated? Without putting the employer in the role of, unless they create some kind of national database that your employer can go on and put your name in and determine, did you actually go get the shot or did you not?
Well, I assume that an employer, similar to a school, like when my kids are enrolled at school, I have to give them evidence of their vaccines. Now,
but that's what made me think of it. I've had to go get dip test, whatever it was.
I'm assuming an employer could ask for the same information, but it would have to be everybody's got to do the same. It's applied universally to everybody and maintained safely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is couldn't I just go? Several of us didn't want to get our dip test shot in high school, and one of the kids was talking about copying it and using it, but using each other's. Back then, it was a joke because I was in high school quite a while ago, but now with Photoshop and whatnot, it would be quite easy to do.
I assume they could look up a record though if they had to, right?
That's what I'm saying. There would have to be some kind of record system, and then who would get access to it? Because Jared, for some odd reason, I might not want you to have access to knowing whether I'm vaccinated or not? And can just anybody and everybody go log in?
So Christina, we're not going to put you on the hook on that one. It's not you.
That's
How you're solving that.
what an administrative quandary it opens up.
But I
Yeah.
think and Angie, that's what I was thinking the conversation could lead to, which is administratively, how's it being done? I think what Christina's been really helpful with, and Nancy confirmed, is that we still have responsibilities for HIPAA. We have responsibilities for our employees' good health. We have responsibilities for not treating employees differently.
Mhm.
So in wrapping up, Christina, anything else you want to share with us? Or I know your contact information's in the chat if anybody has direct questions for you. Anything else though you want to add as we wrap up?
I just want people to start talking about it now so that we don't end up, you know, pointing the fingers and having a big fight over it when it finally comes. I think it's really good to talk about now.
Great.
So thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
conversation. And
Thank you, Christina.
in wrapping up, we still try to have a little bit of humor, pandemic or otherwise. So thanks, Jared, for sharing these thoughts about the holiday truck that last year was Coke, was this year we hope is a vaccine. We have another out to lunch next week with the Small Business Development Center addressing lessons learned and why looking back is so critical before you look forward. So I invite you to that. Then we're going to take off for the holiday and then return back in January. I will point out that the one that says Colton about physical fitness, it's more about adapting to physical fit, using physical fitness as an example, but it's how to adapt. So I think we got a couple good conversations coming up. We look forward to seeing you again. Thanks everybody. And Christina, thanks again.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you guys for coming. Have a great day.
Welcome.
Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye.